carbon is carbon that's captured and or stored by the world's marine and coastal ecosystems in the same way that habitats like woodland and peatland on land store and capture carbon. So when we talk about blue carbon, we're talking about habitats like seagrass, salt marsh. So these are the habitats that we understand the most in regards to their blue carbon contributions. But we also believe that there's habitats like biogenic reefs, so living reefs, think coral reefs, seabed sediments, so think mud, sand, gravels, also store carbon and could potentially make contributions to climate mitigation. So marine animals can sequester carbon through a range of natural processes. That includes just storing carbon in their bodies, excreting carbon-rich waste products, so pooping, that sinks to the sea floor, and also fertilising and protecting marine plants. So in particular, scientists are beginning to recognise that vertebrates, so things like fish and our seabirds, as well as marine mammals like seals and whales, have the potential to be locking away carbon from the atmosphere. So marine protected areas, essentially what we call nature reserves at sea, are a tool that conservationists can use to protect areas of the sea, largely for the biodiversity value. Highly protected marine areas offer a gold standard level of protection. So what's that got to do with blue carbon? Well, if we're to consider habitats and species for their blue carbon value when making decisions on where these marine protected areas and highly protected areas should be located, then actually we can secure the best outcomes for biodiversity and climate. So blue carbon habitats have many benefits to nature and communities. If we go back to seagrass, for example, it filters sediment and other nutrients and different types of pollution from the water, so it improves water quality. It secures and stabilises sediment and so offers protection to coasts from erosion. It's also important as a habitat for wildlife because seagrass meadows act as nursery areas. They also act as a place to take refuge from predators to a range of different species and as a source of food to some species. So all of these services provided by blue carbon habitats help our wildlife thrive as well as benefiting ourselves. We all want clean water that we can swim in. We all want sustainable fisheries so we can eat seafood well into the future. And of course, we want protection against flooding. So it makes sense to protect all of these habitats, not just for their blue carbon value. I think it's also important to say that investing and protecting and restoring blue carbon habitats makes absolute environmental and economic sense. It's far cheaper to protect what we already have, take good care of it, make sure that it's healthy and that it's working in the way that it should be, and it's doing the jobs that I've just described, than it is to try and replace these habitats in the future, which isn't always possible anyway. So there's many organisations and government agencies, including the wildlife trusts, that are working towards restoring blue carbon habitats across the UK. There's also a lot of work being done by organisations like ourselves, working with those relevant agencies to protect the blue carbon habitats that we already have. However, it's really important to say that blue carbon habitats do not have any legal protections in terms of their blue carbon storage and sequestration value. But we need to recognise that actually over 2/3 of the UK is underwater. And so potentially there's a lot of natural carbon stores within that area. The government has committed to delivering on net zero by 2050, but that huge marine area is largely being ignored. So this definitely needs to change, as the marine environment has a key role to play in this transition, given its unique ability alongside its terrestrial counterparts to sequester and store carbon.